Hey, Groovesters, Ridgely here with Groove Growth Program, and I'm super excited to have a dear friend on with us who run a heck of a company for a really long time, entrepreneur, female of the year, Millennium Multi-Award winning champion lady that you are going to learn a lot from. Gail Davis, CEO of GDA Speakers, a place that I'm proud to be represented by as well. And Gail, these are all young entrepreneurs. Now, they may not be young biologically, but in terms of their entrepreneurial journey, they're people who are just coming online, big community, over 500,000 people, learning how to get their message, their products, et cetera. And we just want to learn from you, your journey. So take us back a little bit. How did you decide, A, to become an entrepreneur, and B, to become the CEO of a woman-owned business in Dallas, Texas? Pretty impressive. Take us back a little bit. How'd that work?
Well, it's a great story because I'm a late start entrepreneur. I had a very traditional corporate experience. I graduated from college and went to work for a large company, which was headquartered in Dallas, called EDS, Electronic Data Systems. The company doesn't exist under that name today, but many people know it as the company that was founded by Ross Perot. Mm-hmm. And I had a phenomenal experience. I played lots of different roles in that corporation, which now looking back really prepared me to run my own company. I was a corporate recruiter. I was in corporate training. I led the corporate events team. I ran our sales recognition program. So I had a lot of experience. I learned how to travel. I learned how to read a financial statement. I learned what a P&L was. So, you know, I was a journalism major in college, but I really got my MBA, if you will, at EDS. A phenomenal experience. When I was leading the sales recognition event, one year, the chairman, at the end of an event, we were having a staff party, and he asked me, hey, who are our keynote speakers going to be next year? And I like to tell that story to speaker friends because I think it just really shows how important the right speaker is to the chairman of a Fortune, probably was a Fortune 100 company. So, you know, inside I was thinking, oh, I don't know who our speaker is going to be next year. We just finished this event, but I decided it was an opportunity to engage with him. And so I asked, well, we don't have our speaker yet, but why are you asking? What's on your mind? Tell me what you're thinking. And he said, I am so tired of the same old, same old. I would like to find something that's new and different. At the end of this year, I will have heard Colin Powell, Margaret Thatcher, Madeleine Albright, each probably 2 or 3 times. And he said, I want to step outside the box, and I want to find someone that everyone would like to hear, but no one's heard. I want someone that's international in their appeal. And I was like, okay, so kind of filed it away. Completely unrelated. On a Friday night, you know, young family, went up to the strip center, grabbed a pizza, went into the video store, and was perusing, you know, the VHS tapes in alphabetical order. And I saw the movie Alive. And I had always wanted to see the movie, but I hadn't. So I was like, I grabbed that movie and went home. And at the time I was married, and I had mentioned to my former husband this quest that I was on, if you will, but not like, let's watch this movie because maybe this is the answer. He just knew the story. And we settled in to watch the movie. And early in the movie, he's like, I think this is your guy. And I don't even know what he's talking about. I'm like, what? And he goes, for Inner Circle, this would be your guy. I mean, everybody would love to hear this story. And these guys are from Uruguay. I think it'd be fantastic. And I was like, not sure I think that idea. Maybe you should do mergers and acquisitions. I'll stick to speaker selection. But by the end of the movie, there's this wide angle scene, and there's a stainless steel cross, and Aaron Neville is singing Ave Maria. And I'm like, sold. And so it's funny because that was in 1994. And when you mentioned young entrepreneurs, I know you were referencing young in their journey, but there may also be some people that find this very hard to believe. But in 1994, folks, there was no such thing as Google. So when you wanted to find a person that potentially would be a speaker, you were really limited. You had to go to speakers bureaus, because how else were you going to reach out and contact somebody? I mean, it just didn't happen. So, I don't want to take all the time with this. So I'll try to tell the super fast version. I knew lots of speakers bureaus. I went to them. I told them my idea. They kind of discouraged me, just because they make a movie about someone doesn't make them a good speaker, valid. Just because a book's written about someone doesn't make them a good speaker, valid. But bottom line, I knew I was onto something. I could feel it in my bones. I watched another documentary called Alive 20 Years Later. I ended up finding Nando myself. He came to speak at our event in Maui in February of '95. It was off the charts. And the chairman jokingly put his arm around me and said, "You know what, kid, you should retire." And I'm like, "Retire?" And he's like, "I don't think you'll ever outdo this." And so he sort of planted an idea. So fast forward, a lot of things happened in the company. The chairman was no longer the chairman. My dearest mentor and manager had died of leukemia. I don't know, it was just becoming a slightly different company, and they were doing some layoffs, and this opportunity presented itself to me that, based on how long I'd been there, 20 years, I could potentially be laid off and walk away with 1 year's salary. And so seemed like a good thing to do. I was ready for something different. And that's how I made the decision. Now, how I got to be a really serious entrepreneur and focused on scaling, that's another story, but that is how I decided to become an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm. So it was you saw the opportunity in front of you and you said, "I think I can do this."
Yes.
Now say a little bit more, because I think there's so much to unpack there already. First of all, just beginning with the fact that although you had not been an entrepreneur, you did have a lot of experience, 20 years of experience. So how did that, so that all of those people who are coming into Groove, for example, that have a body of experience of some kind that they bring to taking their message online and bringing it out to the world, how did that impact your journey as an entrepreneur? As you started going, as you started making those steps, how'd that work out?
Some things, based on my experience, were one of my greatest assets, and some things, based on my experience, were true obstacles. So we'll go with the assets first. I get it when someone says procurement. I get it when someone talks about risk management. I know what they mean when they say the C-suite. I understand politics. I understand chain of command. I understand approval processes. I mean, I just get the landscape of the corporate world. I can't imagine, having this idea to do this like at 21 years of age, and being able to navigate as gracefully as I was able to large companies like AT&T, Equinix, Cisco, because that experience that I had, I wasn't lost when they were describing their environment to me. As a matter of fact, I had been there, and it's kind of fun, when I would be talking to event planners and they'd say, "Oh, we're going to San Juan." I'd say, "Oh, what hotel?" "Oh, the El Conquistador." "Oh, are you using the round ballroom?" So, I mean, literally down to the point of I've been in almost every ballroom. It just, that experience was really an asset. Where it became a little bit of an obstacle is I had so much pressure on myself and standards I was holding myself to, like the phone should be answered within 3 rings and, high level. Well, I was one person, and, you have to prioritize. And I remember my former husband saying to me, "You're never going to get it all done. The trick now is to decide what's the most important thing to get done and what is okay to let go." Well, in the EDS culture, I don't know that it was ever okay to let anything go. And so that was a super shift for me to legitimately go, okay, the day's over and here's 10 things that didn't happen. But you know what? Those are the 10 things that if you're not going to get to them, that's okay. But that was a big change. And then things like, I worked for a technology company. So if something didn't work, you dialed a 4-digit extension and some guru showed up and, fixed it and everything was wonderful. Well, now I was the person that had to fix it. I had to do everything.
Right.
And I will never forget the first time I had a kind of a live wire of a client. And she was like, I think this Nando sounds great. Can you send me his video? And I said, absolutely. And she said, well, really, I have a meeting tomorrow afternoon. Could you overnight it? And I'm like, absolutely. And I get her contact information and I hang up, and I in my old world, I just threw it in a wire basket with a note and somebody made it happen, So I'm like, where are FedEx forms? We don't have any. Who's in charge of FedEx? Oh, that would be me. And I remember do a FedEx. I had no idea. So I remember going to like some place called Mail Copy Pack or something. And we get the thing done, and then she gives me the bill, and it was like, I don't know, $35 or something. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, I had no frame of reference because of where I had grown up. So those are just some funny stories.
and what was it like in those early days when you're sitting at that desk and you're saying, oh, GDA speakers, that would be me, Gail Davis. I mean,
it was crazy. And, I'm a journalism major. I'm a storyteller. I'm creative. But to run a business, you've also got to understand how to do a budget. And I mean, I had experience with that, but in the early days, I would sit with my CPA and, just trying to understand the difference between closing a deal and how exciting that is, but what really is your gross profit and how does cash flow work? I mean, there were days that I thought my head was going to explode, but I had the best and still have the best CPA on the planet. And she would give me all I could handle. And then she'd go, you know what? Don't worry about that anymore. You just go do what you do and it'll all work out. So,
By the way, we're not espousing that as being the best.
No, that may not be the best method. Well, what she really said, I kind of left the key thing out. I've got my eye on how the finances are going to work. You go worry about sales. I'll keep this. So it wasn't like, we'll just ignore it. I did. Thank you for the laugh, because you're right. It wasn't exactly that way.
And tell us about a unique or big challenge that you faced and what you did to overcome that.
Early on or more recently?
Take your pick.
Well, the biggest business challenge I've ever faced in my entire lifetime was the global pandemic. There's no doubt. It was unbelievable. And I know everybody has a similar story, but what was unique to our industry is, meetings were not even allowed. I mean, people couldn't gather in groups of more than 10 or 50. And early on, some of the reports were outbreaks of the virus had come from meetings. There was one particular meeting in New York City. So, I mean, it basically just pulled the plug on this entire industry. And, all of our contracts are in the cloud, but I like to use the metaphor of somebody walking into my office and saying, hey, can I see all your executed contracts that you've yet to deliver on? And, I imagine myself proudly walking over because they're all color coded and labeled beautifully. And I say, here they are. And that person picks them up, rips them, throws them up in the air and says, have fun, and walks out. That is literally what happened. And I couldn't open email without, sorry, we have to cancel. 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 And then when that would become so nauseating, the phone would ring and you'd pick it up and it'd be like, hey, we need to cancel. And it was so discouraging. I mean, everything was just going in the wrong direction. And early on, so how did I handle it? And how did I got the best advice, absolute best advice. Someone told me I should run 3 scenarios. This was in early March. Scenario number 1, assume no live events through May of 2020. That seemed ludicrous, but I ran the numbers. And then scenario number 2, no events through August. That actually didn't move the needle that much because summers are usually kind of slow. So that wasn't that much more unsettling. Then scenario number 3, no live events for the remainder of 2020. And when I got that number, it just made me sick because I was not willing to go in the hole that far. And so that's when I had to really look at business needs, and I had to just be very decisive. And I believe the very first day I let 3 people go. Then PPP money came around and I was able to exist a little bit longer. And then I let more people go. When the pandemic hit, I had 12 employees. And at the leanest, I got down to 4. But the processes that we put in place, the creativity that we use to find solutions, believe it or not, we still have 10 events that have yet to be resolved out of a total of probably right around 300. There's still 10, if you can believe it. So there was a lot of cancellations. There was a lot of kicking the can down the road. And in the midst of all that, I told my team, you need to learn everything you can about virtual, everything. And so we became experts and we found this new thing that we could do, which is sell virtual presentations. But still, even doing that, the revenue from 2019 to 2020 was literally cut in half.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I remember with my own speaking, I had $70,000 booked in the next 90 days, and I watched every single job get canceled.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you, I just recovered one of them. In December, I flew up to Canada for the first time to do a job that was committed to a long time that just never happened. And finally, it was like hilarious. But yeah, now here's the thing that's interesting. And I think worth mentioning to Groove members, especially, what happened for the sake of everyone in Groove is actually a huge positive. Because of what you're talking about, everybody being forced to go virtual, everybody being forced to go online, suddenly the online possibilities expanded dramatically.
Yes.
And the footprint of online today has taken a radical jump forward because of the pandemic. So I have a funny question for you. Do you think as we emerge from this, that it will be more helpful to your business, or that it's never going to go back to the way it was before?
I mean, there are some things that won't go back to the way they were before. You know, I think long gone are the days of an event planner just signing a contract without reading it. And believe it or not, there used to be a lot of that happened, myself included, when I was at EDS. I mean, I didn't have time to read the fine print and, you know, understand what force majeure meant. Well, I can pretty much tell you, there's not anybody in this industry right now that doesn't know what force majeure means. So I think contracting will forever be changed. I also think that virtual presentations have a place. They have a place. And so that they won't go away in their entirety. And what we do know is they can be an option. And so in a scenario where someone has an only this person speaker booked, so let's just use a ludicrous example, the Queen of England. She doesn't accept speaking engagements, but there's only one Queen of England, right? So if you have, there's only one, and that speaker gets an inner ear infection and says, man, I'm sorry, but my doctor said I cannot get on an airplane. What we know now is you can still gather your people. You can have a heck of a meeting, but if people were pumped to hear the Queen of England, and again, she doesn't go out for speaking dates, I'm just using a crazy example, Zoom her in, or you know, have her there virtually. Because in large ballrooms, people watch the IMAX screens anyway. It's really not the end of the world. So I think that will stay. So yeah, those are a couple of things. But people love in-person events. And so, and I don't think people take things for granted, you know. And I think maybe having that virtual option, like, you know, people are very accommodating to employees now for everything, you know. So there are going to be some employees that for health reasons don't wish to travel. So there may need to be a hybrid option. You know, I don't know now that you can just say, well, too bad, I'm sorry you don't feel comfortable traveling because this is an in-person event and you're just going to miss it. I'm seeing a lot more creativity in contracting, like, hey, can we report it? It won't be downloadable. It'll be password protected. It'll be available for 48 hours. So people are realizing that, we've got a tool here now. So and we've seen effective ways to use it. So let's not let that all go as we return to normal, if there is such a thing.
I know, right? And it's such a great lesson, because in Groove, it says anybody can do virtual meetings. And yet we still also love live meetings. I went to speak to the Toledo Regional Commerce last month. 500 people were there. Huge event. Why? Well, because they hadn't met in 2.5 years.
Yeah.
So normally it's 300 to 400. They had over 500 people showed up there, and they were walking up to each other. Hey, haven't seen you in years, except on Zoom, right? And it was real. It was hilarious. And we do that too. We have a lot of virtual meetings that we're doing right now. We're in the middle of a movie launch, and we think we've got about 7 million emails going out to promote the digital marketing revolution, which is what we're all a part of. And it's super cool. So there's stuff that you can do, but there's also no substitute for giving somebody a hug.
Yeah.
It's just tough. All right, so a couple questions. What do you think are your top 1 or 2 skills that entrepreneurs need to, if not master, get on top of?
Well, I think resiliency is something for sure, because it's not a linear track being an entrepreneur. And if you like to know how things are and how they're going to turn out and plan for, next Thursday afternoon at 3, maybe being an entrepreneur is not a good match, because the unpredicted always happens, and being able to deal with it, I think, is so incredibly important. I think public speaking skills, and it might not come as a surprise to you, but I think they're so important. I mean, I was taking speech classes when I was in 4th grade. I was in the 4-H speech contest. I think being able to articulate and communicate your thought will serve you well in sales pitches, in getting alignment from your employees, because you can't do it alone. And as you try to scale, you need a team, and you need to be able to articulate your vision to your team so that your team comes along with you. I personally am a huge believer in finding support, whether that is from my nutritionist, whether that is my business coach, or for me, I'm very involved in EO, the Entrepreneur Organization. I know there are many other organizations like Vistage and YPO, and just a variety, your community that you're building here. I think having like-minded people and having that support is really key, because it can be kind of lonely, at the top.
Yeah, no. And as an EO member for 20 years, obviously, I'm a huge believer. But let's talk about the dynamics of EO or Vistage or YPO or Tech Accelerant, whatever. There's many of them. The concept of the mastermind, because in EO we call it forum. And in other places they call it chapter meetings. In Vistage, there are different names for it. But what do you think is the benefit from getting together on a regular basis with that peer group of people that are like-minded to advance your business?
Well, I think, if it depends on the health of the forum, and if they really hold themselves to a high standard. It can become very routine and just kind of like, oh, here we are, here's our updates. But do you really go deep? Do you really share? Are you willing to really listen to feedback? And so it's that classic thing. You're only going to get out of it what you put into it, but it's really, really true. An experience that was invaluable to me during the pandemic were many of the mastermind groups that I've developed within my own industry. And we would have these industry calls, and we would get on Zoom, and sometimes they involved polling. Sometimes people submitted questions in advance, but it was a lifeline. It was like, okay, who's run up against this? How are you handling that? What should we do, when we run into this scenario? And the generosity of my colleagues from what one might on the outside think, aren't those your competitors? No, they're my colleagues. And the generosity of what people shared as best practices to help each other get through this unbelievably challenging situation was a lifeline.
Mm-hmm. And especially for relative newbies to business, there's a certain, not only the lifeline from the learning, but there's the lifeline because of the shared experience piece that, okay, if you're in this mastermind, this forum, this group, you're in there with people who have probably gone through similar sufferings in their own space, whatever that thing is. So say more about that. Say more about that. That's like the extra support system that you get by virtue of just being part of it.
So in my EO forum, when we present or share, we can have two different experiences. One is gestalt, where we say, don't tell the person what to do, but experience share, something that's similar. Speak to your experience. And the thought process there is then the person that is presenting the challenge, kind of works through to their own answer. So sometimes that's super effective. And it's amazing how your experience share in a completely different industry can be the thought that just really helps that person shift. Sometimes people are like, I don't care. I just want advice, rapid fire. Just tell me what you would do. What are your thoughts? So I think having that flexibility and willingness to take a direct or more of an experience-based can be really invaluable.
Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit about the concept of the need for ongoing learning, personal development, leadership development. What do you feel about that to be successful as an entrepreneur?
Well, obviously, I think it's critical because that's what my whole organization is all about. And, I've always said, the funny thing about speakers is sometimes a really enlightened leader will hire an outside voice to come in and say what they've been saying for 6 months to a year. But sometimes that perspective, that this expert, this person who's from the outside standing on the stage, the person who's written the book, sometimes that's what it takes to get people to hear it, because sometimes leaders just it can start to sound almost like a broken record. And so I think I use the word enlightened intentionally because I think that a really self-actualized enlightened leader can say, look, I have been barking this song up this tree for 6 months and I'm not moving the needle. But I know this is the message I want. So how do I go out there and find someone that can come in that can reinforce my vision of where I'm taking this company, or reinforce this aspect of the culture that I feel so strongly about? So I think it's really important. And I think, I think leaders, entrepreneurs have to be willing to reinvent themselves over and over and over. When I worked at EDS, granted it was 23 years ago, and if you take when I started, that was like 43 years ago, I would say the culture at EDS at that time was very much command and control. There were a lot of ex-military people. You kind of told people how it was. There were some phrases that just make my skin crawl now, like if one person was saying one thing, another person was saying something, you'd say, well, let's get all the liars in a room. I mean, like literally that's the way that culture was. And that's the way people talked, and they loved their people. And I loved working there. So it wasn't off-putting. It was just a different time. Well, now you have to be very politically correct. You have to, step out of the drama triangle, and you have to encourage people and ask powerful questions and get people. You have to lead people versus manage people. And it's very different. And I don't think you naturally just wake up one day and know that. I think it's through hearing speakers, reading books, being in a group that challenges you, hearing other people's experiences. That's how you start to reinvent yourself. And I think a really honest conversation is, is what I'm doing working? Because a lot of times you'll be like, dang it, man, these employees aren't loyal anymore. I've got all this turnover and shoot, you can't find good people anymore. Well, I had to have an honest conversation with myself once and go, well, the only consistent thing around here is me. And if there's a problem with turnover, hello. And the willingness to do that is the only way you're going to, have that resiliency and be better. You can't be better unless you're willing to ask yourself, what role am I playing in this? And sometimes it's a tough pill to swallow.
That is so key for entrepreneurs, though. Oh my gosh. So check this one out. I got one for you. You're speaking to the Gail of 20 years ago with the experience of the Gail of today.
Ooh.
What would you want to say to that 20 years ago Gail that you know now, based on all the experience that you've had as a businesswoman, as a CEO, as an entrepreneur? What would you want to convey?
I'm jotting on a piece of paper. I have so many thoughts going into my head.
Awesome. That's what we want. It's exciting.
Yeah.
It's a great question. I love that question.
Yeah, I love it. So yeah, that young, cute thing. Yeah. Don't eat so many carbs, Gail. That would be my first line.
Well, now you're the slightly more mature, cute thing. So there you go.
Yeah. So I would say, be you, have clarity around your vision. Not only what you want to create professionally, but what you want to create personally. And you can have it all. I got sold a myth somewhere along the line that women can have it all, but they can't have it all at the same time. You can have it all. So get really, really clear on that vision. Do not be afraid. Do not be too conservative. Believe in your vision. Don't be afraid to spend money. Side note, I look back on how much money I wasted because I was trying to save money. Like, here's this person, they're super qualified and they would be great, but here's somebody that I can teach everything to and they won't cost as much. Maybe take the risk, and you deserve it. Your organization deserves it. Don't be afraid to get what you need. I think I made a lot of missteps along the way because I was so super conservative. And then probably the most important thing is just take good care of the people. What you have to say to them may not always be what they want to hear, but as long as you're fair, explaining the business rationale behind it, people will stick with you. And so I think taking care of people, and probably the biggest thing I learned along the way that I would tell that young Gail is, you can have tough conversations without being tough. I think somewhere along the way, I thought that when I had to shift to a tough conversation or some bad news, I needed to bring my, really tough personality. And you don't, it's okay to be soft, gracious, kind, gentle, and deliver a tough conversation. And so I think that would be the advice.
I love it. All right. 3 books people should read according to Gail.
Well, I'm probably always going to say Miracle in the Andes, written by Nando, Parrado, because I started my company because of him. And for years, people read Piers Paul Reed's book, Alive, but Nando wrote his own book in 2007, and it debuted as number 10. And I think it is the most incredible perspective of what really matters. Yes, it's the tale of what happened in a plane crash, but at the end of the day, it's about family. It's a love story. And it's about family, and it's about friendship. So I think everybody should read Miracle in the Andes. I love the book, The Lost Years, by Kristina Wandzilak and Constance Curry. It's written by a mother-daughter duo, and it's about, you might think it is about the daughter losing her way with drug and alcohol addiction, but it's really not. It's about resiliency and second chances, and there never being a situation that can't get better. So it's the ultimate, great book. It's a very inspirational story. What would my
And
third
who
book
wrote that one again? Who wrote that one again? The Lost Years?
The Lost Years, Kristina with a K, Kristina Wandzilak.
Oh
And
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Curry.
Yeah. I've met her before.
You probably have. You probably have. And then I'm trying to think. Oh, I'm a big fan of traction, and we're talking entrepreneurs, so I'm gonna say traction. Hold on. Or rocket fuel. Traction and rocket fuel are both good. I mean, I'm not selling the entrepreneur operating system because you could read it and go do something different, but it talks about the entrepreneur and how, it's like the E-Myth. I think that's another great book. If you have the E-Myth, I love that book. Just because you know how to make good apple pies doesn't mean you can run a great apple pie franchise, So it's all about taking your passion, and then when is the time that you invest in the person that might be better at scaling and taking it to the next level than you? And that's back to having that honest conversation with yourself. And I wish I would have done that sooner. I mean, I'm finally on that path, but I thought I could do everything. And most entrepreneurs do think they can do everything, but it's a really good question to ask yourself. Am I the best person to be doing this? Both for the menial things that you shouldn't be doing, and also sometimes for the really big ones. Sometimes you're not the right person to scale it.
Yep. All right. Final words to entrepreneurs, budding entrepreneurs. What would you want to say?
Have fun. Have so much fun. Because if you love what you do, the profit will follow. I do believe that in my heart of hearts. Also, I think do the right thing. So important. Your clients will stick with you when you do the right thing. Your employees will stick with you when you do the right thing. You can sleep at night when you do the right thing. You'll like the person you see when you look in the mirror. So just do the right thing. Ethics can be very, very slippery. And I've always had, I think this might be other advice, I've always had squeaky clean accounting. Very, very clear. As you know, Ridgely, in our business, we get a deposit when someone books a speaker. I, from day one, have kept those deposits in an escrow type account and never touched them to borrow a penny, because I always operated under the idea that what if something happened to you and you couldn't give the speech? I've got to give every bit of that money back to the client. So I just operated under the assumption that until it happened, it wasn't anybody's money. It's not your money. It's not my money. It's really the client's money until you show up and deliver, and then I can pay you and I can keep my portion. That has saved me a lot of headaches over the years. I'm so glad I took that approach.
Do the right thing. I hear that over and over. So important. Gail Davis, I deeply appreciate you. On behalf of the entire Groove community, thank you for sharing your wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. It was fun. I'm so glad I emailed you on a completely unrelated topic and we ended up here.
Exactly right. It always happens that way. Thanks a lot, Gail.
Thank you.